Find the derivative of g of x equals 2x squared minus x over the square root of x cubed, then evaluate g prime of 4. G of x here equals the quotient, the division, of two different functions. 2x squared minus x divided by the square root of x cubed. One option is the quotient rule. Another option is to take the quotient directly to maybe make the derivative a little easier to find. Now we can take the quotient directly if the denominator has a single term. It's not added or subtracted with anything else, and that's the case here. So we can rewrite the numerator terms over the common denominator. And at this point we have a division by an x to a power, in which case we subtract the exponents. We have x's in the numerator and x's in the denominator, and we'll be subtracting the exponents. I'm going to rewrite the denominator to be a fractional exponent due to the root so that we can subtract the exponents. 2x squared over the square root of x cubed, x to the 3 power and the square or second root 3 over 2, minus x over x to the 3 power and the second root, x to the 3 halves. We can now divide each of the numerators by the denominator by subtraction of exponent so that g of x is equal to 2x to the 2 minus 3 halves minus x to the 1 minus 3 halves. The next thing to do is to get a common denominator between the terms in the exponent. So we will have 2x to the 2 is 4 over 2, be multiplied by 2 over 2, minus 3 over 2, minus x raised to the 1 is 2 over 2, minus 3 over 2. And therefore we have 2x to the 4 minus 3, which is 1 over 2, minus x to the 2 minus 3, which is negative 1 over 2. What we've done is change the g of x from having been a quotient to being two terms that are combined by subtraction, so we can take the derivative of each term individually and combine the results by subtraction. And each term will actually follow the power rule here. Let's take the derivative. G prime of x equals 2 times bring the 1/2 down, x to the 1/2 minus 1, which I will call 2 halves, and then minus bring the negative 1/2 down, x raised to the negative 1/2 minus 1, which I will call 2 halves. The first term we will multiply the coefficient. Let's call that 2 a 2 over 1. We'll multiply the numerators. 2 times 1 is a 2, over multiply the denominators. 1 times 2 is a 2. X raised to the 1 minus 2, negative 1 over a common denominator of 2. The second term, coefficient negative times a negative 1/2, is a positive 1/2. Double negative becomes positive. X raised to the minus 1 minus 2, negative 3 over the common denominator of 2. Now in the first term, that 2 over 2 can cancel, and that'll leave us with a 1. Since we have negative exponents, we're going to rewrite by moving them to the other position. They're in the numerator right now. We'll move to the denominator to make them a positive exponent. So g prime of x equals 1 over x to the positive 1/2 plus 1 over, there's a 2 already in the denominator, and that x will move down there with that 2 and turn into a positive exponent, positive 3 halves. One more step. We may rewrite that first term because x to the 1/2 means x to the first power and then second root, square root of x to the first power, or just square root of x. The The second term we'll just leave to the 3/2. If it's not a 1 over number, generally it's just left to the power, so it would be a 3/2. It does mean square root and cubed, but we often just call that 3/2, and then when we evaluate, we'll think of it as the square root cubed. The next step is to evaluate g prime of 4. That means to take the derivative, g prime of x, and plug a 4 in for each x, so 1 over the square root of 4, plus 1 over 2 times 4 raised to the 3/2. 1 over the square root of 4 is a 2, plus 1 over 2 times 4 to the 3/2. That means the square root of 4 cubed. Let's take the square root first. Square root of 4 is a 2, and then you cube that result. So we have a 1 over 2 plus a 1 over 2 times 2 cubed. 2 times 2 is 4, times 1 over 2 is an 8. So 1 over 2 plus 1 over 2 times 8 is a 16. We're going to want to get a common denominator. We're going to need to multiply the 1 over 2 by 8 over 8. So 1 over 2 times 8 over 8 plus 1 over 16 will give us 8 over 16 plus 1 over 16. 8 plus 1 is 9 over 16.